Hello. We are going to be talking about some components, but mostly state and props today in React. Um, so yeah, um, where to begin? So we've got some. Actually, you know what? I'm going to just pop open an editor. I already started up a little project here for is that out there? Great. And moving over there. Cool. I've already started up a little application, a default application here. And I just want to kind of play around with making some components and stuff. I decided to grab some data and throw it in a JavaScript file here, and we'll talk about how to grab that in just a second. So I'm gonna pull out some of the not super necessary stuff here. Start, and I'm going to just clear out all the default stuff there. And so that should boop, go away. Great. And so now we can say, we're going to take this away because who knows what kind of stuff they got there. I'm just going to put an H1 here and say, this is, tarot cards. And boom, that shows up. I am going to, you know what? I am going to pull in a little bit of CSS. And the one that I like is like super minimal, called Get Skeleton. And you can either include this in, where's the files? There we go. You can either include this in, where's the thing? That's not what I want. As a um, as a CSS file, which I'll probably will do here. I'm just going to copy the link tag and throw it in the HTML. You can also include the CSS um, in the React application. Have it just import that as well. I'm just going to have it pulled from the CDN, and this is just a super basic, super basic CSS framework that looks like this by default. Basically, just like makes it not look awful. So I'm going to use that for my starters here, and we can see already since I brought that in. Hey, look at that. So I think what is going to call it? Container. Great. I'm just going to make this a container here in my app. That will do probably nothing. Yeah, there it is. Great. So got a nice little margin here. It's going to give me some nice fonts by default. Great. So what are we going to do here? So let's talk about what we want. So I have some data here, and this is in just a JavaScript file. This is a module. You can tell because I'm exporting stuff from it. And I'm just exporting a list of tarot cards here. And it's in an object with a key. I just Googled tarot JSON and found something on GitHub. No, no promises here. It looks like it's referring to some images, but I'm not sure where those are. So, great. I'm gonna first let's bring this into our application here. So since it's a module, and here it is here, I'm just going to import it. Logo. I'm going to import. I'm just going to call it data. Terrible name. I'm going to call it cards. Equals import. Nope, not import. From data. Dot data. There we go. And if we, in our function, so this is again kind of to review. We have our root in our HTML. Our base JavaScript is going to grab that root element, create a React DOM root, and then it's going to render all of our stuff in there via the app component. So everything that that app returns is going to be rendered into that HTML that we can see. We've done that, and we get that there. So so this function is a function that runs whenever it is rendered, and that means we can put stuff in here. I'm just going to console log out our data, and just to make sure that we are actually getting what we think we're getting. Cool, there it is. What's that? Who knows? Oh, right, okay. Cool, so here's all our data. We've got names and whatnot. So I wonder, you know what? I'm gonna see if I can find those images real quick. Wonder if it's also in here somewhere. Probably not. Oh well. Yeah, never mind. So I'm not going to worry about the images right now. So I think what I just want to do is grab this data and let's just list them out. So what's this going to look like in, I know what I'm going to do. Is it place cage? There we go. I don't want an alternative, dude. I want the real thing. Where is it? Place cage, place cage. Oh no, it's down. That's why there's alternatives. What about
Yeah, I feel like a lot of these fun Nicolas Cage things are
uh,
no longer in existence. Because I used to have like a GIF plugin that would generate them, and I don't know, maybe there was
oh,
some copyright issues or something.
oh, that's terrible. I don't want unsplashless. Oh, can I do an unsplash with? Oh, that's so sad. Those are the best. Placeholder images. Great, sure, this will be fine. So we're just gonna grab placeholder images here. Um, so we've got our data here. So oh, I'm so sad about that. We've got an object that has one key tarot. So I'm going to actually say, so if we log cards, tarot, that'll get us just the list, just the array. And that is what I want. Cool. So what I'd like to do is let's just put these all on the page. So I've got my header here. And you know what? Just for kicks, well, we'll leave it here for now. I'm going to make a little component for each one of the cards, or I'm gonna display all the cards here. And so, what do I want a card to look like? It's gonna be a div. We'll give it a class name, card. That means we're going to say, it's gonna be a div, and it's gonna be we're gonna display block, so it's gonna be a height equals 200 pixels. Oops, come on. Width. It's gonna have a black border. And it's gonna have a margin. These are what do you want to display? Let's display inline block. So they line up nice. I'll give it like a I don't know, 10 pixel margin. Cool. So now when we make a card, it's gonna look like something at least. So here in our we don't look at that, we don't look at that. Here in our app, so I've got the class of card. And if I just put something in here, there's that. So yeah, so we don't actually want that to show inside, right? Let's have it show outside. Is that right? 100. 100. Let's make it like 300 by 200. We'll say. And actually, we want a few parts on this, right? We want. Let's look what it looks like. So the whole card is going to be like that. We want the actual image. Image. We'll figure that out. And we'll put a little section here. That's for the title. We'll call that class name. Card title. We'll call this. Here's cool. So I got an extra div. Why is it done like that? Doing section title. One. Card title. What did I miss here? H1. Div, image, section, div. Huh. It's gonna give me errors, right? Give me some errors. No? Why are you red? I don't trust you. We'll find out. So cool. Here's that. Why is it not the right size? Interesting.
I think you set it to 300 by 300.
I set it to 300 by 300. Why is it doing it? Because that's what I told it to do. Cool. Great. So this is the card itself. Let's go ahead and do card image and card. And we'll make this one, we'll make the font weight bold, bolder. We'll do the text align center. And yeah, that should be fine. I don't think I actually want a border on the card itself, but I do want it on the card image. So let's put that here. This is probably still not going to be great, but yeah, that's fine. Yeah, actually, let's make this like 400 by 300 and make the card image itself 200 or 300. Cool. That look like nothing. It looks like nothing. Am I talking about class name? It was card image, card. Aha. Let's do that. Card image. There we go. Cool. That's fine. That's fine. So now that we have this here, I'm worried about that. I don't know why that's there. Still waiting for something. What's it waiting for? So curious. Identifier. Weird. That's fine. Get rid of all that. Doesn't like this for some reason. Does it want these to be double quotes just for kicks? Maybe. No. What does it hate? Oh no, what does it hate? It's this. But it's working. Why is it working? Why is it working and still giving me guff? Who knows? Identifier expected. That's so weird. I wonder why. I'm sure it'll complain at us. And so right now, let's just give all of our cards. They're going to be 300 by 200. So I'm going to give them these right now. And that should. Card total, unterminated string constant. Yep, that's what I did there. Cool. So there's our placeholder. There's the whatever. And You know what? Just for fun, I'm just going to give us just a tiny little background color. I'm just going to give it like a little beige. We want that. Yeah, we'll just leave it like that. Not going to worry about centering everything and putting in the flex box and all that. Because we're talking about components now. So there's a card on there. So I'd like to make a bunch of these. So I'm going to pull these into a component right now. So I'm going to make a new component. I'm going to call it card. Yeah, why not? New file, card.js. I'm going to export default function card. And we're just going to have it return that. Does not like that because it's there. We go. Fancy. Great. So now this is the same thing that we had there. We just pulled that out. We're just returning it. We don't even need those parentheses if we do this. That's what I usually do, but it's a little bit nicer looking this way. So whatever works best for you. So we've pulled that bit into a component, and now let's use it in our thing here. So instead of doing that, we're going to use card, and it needs to be, oops, card. Nope, okay. Import. Sometimes it likes to import it automatically. So I'm going to import card from card. And now we can use, there we go, card. And right now it's just self-closing and should look exactly the same. Great, it does. There. Cool. So now, and you know, just in case the header gets fancier, I'm going to pull this to a component too. So I'm going to call this header. And this doesn't exist yet, but I'm going to do it this way. Now I can create that file. Now I can create that file. And I'm going to export default function header. Cool. And maybe that'll work. Yeah, that works fine. Cool. So let's talk about what it means to so components easy. It's just HTML or JSX. We are, you know, we're importing our data, we're importing these components. And again, remember that, you know, the components are just literally just functions. We're exporting them and then importing them here. And oh, this bugs me so much, this error. Exporting them from here, importing them here, and then we can use those functions that we exported as components. So every card isn't just going to be garbage, regular card like this. We're going to want some way to pass some information to that card so that we know, so that we can use that component as kind of like a template. So this card here, we clearly don't want just that generic stuff in there. We want to put an actual image source and an actual card title. I'm gonna go with those image sources, but they're not gonna work. So we're gonna get broken images, but that's fine. Yeah. So let's do this. So one of the ways we can put stuff in our JSX, like we were talking about yesterday, is using that curly brackets. And that means in there we can put what?
Functions or variables?
Yeah, yeah. And specifically what kind of JavaScript thing can we put in there?
Props?
We can. That's a variable, and variables are like a variable is an example of a JavaScript.
Statement?
It is a statement. What kind of statement? We're getting close.
Expression.
An expression. Yeah,
Ah,
yeah. And it's a like it's a super subtle distinction that like I'm going to say the majority of JavaScript programmers don't really think about, but it becomes really important when we're using React because only expressions are going to do us any good in there. And I'll show you why in just a second. So an expression again is a JavaScript statement that returns a value, and that value is what's going to show up in there. So we can just put in 4 + 5, and 9 is not an image source. But so we're going to need to give it a variable. So say we have const image URL equals something broken. And so if we want to put that image URL in there, that will show up as a broken image, right? Because that's not a thing that exists, but it will give us a nice error when we look at it. Yeah, wow. Expected a string for a class function object. What is all this garbage it's giving me? Okay, cool. That was just errors while I was typing. Cool. So that I assure you is the URL for the image, something broken. So great. So we know we can replace this with an expression, which is also, we can use a variable or a function that returns something. So what we want to do is get stuff from out here in app to our card. And this is where you mentioned props come in. I always kind of hate the name props. It's just so weird. It's kind of a contraction of properties, but not really. What it is, so again, remember that this is a function, right? We're literally making a function here and exporting it. This function is being used as a component here. And functions take arguments. And in this case, components in React take a default argument called props. And that is generally an object. And the way we send it in is by putting things that look like attributes on these things that look like elements. So if I say, image URL equals another thing, we can pull that out of props by saying props image URL. And let me actually log out what props look like. So props is an object with the keys of the properties that we put in here. I really want that to go away. It's not doing it over here. That's so weird. It's so weird. Oh, that bugs me so much. So if we pass in that prop named image URL, we get in our props object a key image URL with that value. And then we can use it in here. We can also grab, say, const card title equals. Oh, that we don't need that. We can put here props card. And that means we have to pass it in over here. Card title equals the title. And we should see that show up there. Great, there's the title. Cool, so we can pass those in. And again, we have an object that is card title and image URL because we're passing in card title and image URL there. And whatever we put in here is going to be that. And then in card, we can use it by props image URL, props card title, because props is just an object. A cool, fun thing that you can do with JavaScript objects is what's called destructuring. Big word that means this. If we have an object, and props here is an object, so we're passing this object into this function here. And we're basically saying, hey, props is what we're going to call that object. And again, we can call that whatever we want, as long as we're calling it that. It doesn't need to be called props. What we can do with destructuring, so we know we're getting an object, so we're going to use our curly braces, and we can actually put variables in here, or constants really, that are the same name as the keys in our object. So we can say image URL, we can say class name. And then we can see that if we just use image URL and class name here, nope. Class name, why would I do class name? Card title, how about that? And as long as we're passing in image URL and card title there, they'll be picked up by the destructuring here. So again, this is the object that we're passing in, and we're using this destructuring syntax to grab the keys into variables of the same name. That's kind of the flip side when you're, making a variable and you have, I have const thing equals whatever. And we can make an object, const obj equals thing. And that's the same as saying thing. So if we, console log that obj, you can see that it is that. So this is kind of like the flip side of doing that, where instead of creating an object with a key and variable the same name, we're pulling data out into a variable from the key. And you're going to see this in React a lot. You don't have to do it this way. If you like, use props. Different situations may call for different ways to do it. At the end of the day, it's all the same. It's just a matter of which way reads easier to you. You're probably going to see me do this a lot, unless for some reason you get something with like a dozen. We'll figure out a better way to do it.
So
yeah, go for
you
it.
kind of just touched on my question. So between doing like the props and then you do props dot versus destructuring, is it like 99% preference and maybe like a little functionality in certain cases?
Yeah. Again, functionally, they're exactly the same.
Okay.
It's functionality in kind of the rule 2 sense, like what makes more sense to you. If you're not comfortable with destructuring, just use props. It's fine. Use the props object and pull stuff off of that. If you're not using everything that's being pulled in for whatever reason, it's getting 10 attributes on the thing and you're only using 2 of them, the props way might be better, so you don't have a bunch of variables that you're not using hanging around. That's probably a smell that tells you that you need to refactor your component, but whatever. But yeah, they're functionally identical.
Cool. And then setting the props like in the parent, right? When you do that, on the card component, that will always become a object.
Yeah.
Right? Just like the props object, that will always just be an object.
Yep. Everything is always the component name and then all the parameters, and those are always going to be turned into a prop or to a props object.
Props object. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Why is that happening so bad? Cool. Yeah. So that's the very basics. Passing props in there. Any other questions before we move on? Cool. So let's take a look at what it looks like to use our data. So we have that cards.tarot is our list. So if we wanted to, make a bunch of cards, we could do something like, or card in cards tarot, and then do our for loop in here. It's a for loop an expression though?
No.
By my question, it is no. So yeah, this is where I think one of the big hangups, if you're learning React by yourself especially, comes because it's like, oh, you can put JavaScript in there, so I'll put an if statement or a while loop or a switch or whatever, and those are not expressions, so they're not going to return any values. So if we have a list that we need to loop over, and we need it to return some kind of value, what do we do?
The ternary expression.
Yeah, that will do it for if then statements for sure. So instead of saying, if X, Y, else Z, this does not return any sort of value. So instead, we need to do, X question mark Y, otherwise Z. And this will return a value, either Y or Z. So that's the ternary operation is how you would do it if you want to use an if else. But if we want to loop through stuff, what's an approach we can take there?
Like array methods,
Yeah,
like filter and stuff.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, filter is a great one. Filter, find, and in our case, map. So yeah, it's interesting. There's a bunch of methods. I'm just going to kind of type in here. So we have we have our array. If we have, let me just do it this way. If we have an array that looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we want to turn that into, if we want to turn that into, there we go. If we want to turn that into just the odd numbers, so we want to turn that array into a subset of that array. That's when we're going to use filter. If you want to do 1, 3, 5, that's going to be a filter. And this takes an argument of a function that returns true for the things that you want to keep in. So it'd be like, however you want to implement. Anything that returns true for each element, it's going to return a subset of that. And it could just be, if you want to return the entire thing, that will return the entire thing. If you want to return nothing, that will return nothing. There's probably easier ways to do that, but hey, no one's stopping you. Cool. So a filter is a way to take a subset of an array. If we want to turn 1, 2, 3 into 2, 4, 6, say, if we want to turn an array into an array of the same size with each element transformed in some way, we're going to use a map. And this is like math words, like, 1 maps onto 2, 2 maps onto 4, 3 maps onto 6. So for this one, we're giving it a function that's saying, and this is where arrow functions really were made for, because we can just say, E is mapping onto E times 2. This one, E is filtering if it's odd. So if you want to turn an array into an array of the same side with each of its elements mapped onto a new element, map is the way to do it. For power users, say we have 1, 2, 3, and we want to turn that into a single value, say 6. That's when we use the Swiss Army chainsaw here of reduce. And reduce has a slightly different format. It uses the oh my god, is it the current and the accumulator? And basically that says, for each one of these, we're going to keep a running value. For each one of these, do this thing to it. So in this case, I'm going to say, turn it into the accumulator plus the current one. And we're going to start at 0. And so reduce takes a function that takes all the elements of an array and turns it into a single value. That value could be a number, it could be another array, it could be an object, it could be a string, whatever you want. reduce is difficult to get your head around, I think. It definitely took me a while when I was learning it. Know it's there. I'm happy to talk anyone through the details of it, but for now, these two will probably do you pretty good. And the important thing about these is that they return new arrays. They don't change the array that you put in. They return a copy that is altered somehow. And the same with, the 3, 4, 5. Right. If we want to turn this into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're going to use an array.sort on that. And that will return a new array that is sorted in a certain way. And so these are the three that you're going to see most of the time when we're working with React stuff. And sort has its own, if you want to sort in a certain way, it's got its own funky stuff going on. We can talk about that when we need to. So in this case, we have an array of, here's our cards tarot. And that is an array, or that is an array of stuff. So we want to turn those things, and actually let's console log it so we can take a look at it again. Or we can just look at here in the data. So this is an array of objects. Each object has a name, a suite, image, a description, interpretation, and so on. So we want to turn this object into one of these, or one of these, we'll say. So sounds like a good use for a map. So map is returning a value. And so we're going to take the value that it returns, and that's what goes in the curlies. So that's what's going to show up on the page. So we want to turn each one of these objects. Let me bring it over here. Each one of these objects here. And we want to turn each object into a card component that has an image URL and a card title. So we're going to map. We're going to map. And we're going to take each card, say, and we want to turn it into a card component. And we can use this syntax in JSX because when we're doing JSX, that's just a function. So this is saying run this function, and we're going to give it some attributes. And so we know we can use image URL and card title because that's how we set it up. So we can say image URL, and then we can use curlies again in here. And we can say our card image, and those will all be broken. And so we have, let me make this bigger again, sorry. And we also want to add the title in, card title. And so again, we can use curlies in here and say card dot name here. So this looks a little garbagey when you first start learning it, but it reads like we're going to take the result of this and put it on the page. We're going to take this array, which is an array of objects. We're going to take that and we're going to map it onto a new array of something. In our case, we're turning JavaScript objects into card components. So we're taking each card, which is each data object in there, and we're saying turn each card into a card component, and we're going to pass in as the props. The image URL is going to come from this card's image, and the card title is going to come from this card's name. Let's see what we get, and I expect to see some errors over here, probably. There we go. Cool. All these should be the right images. Yeah, so here's our image source here. They don't exist right now. I should probably put together a little demo that has the right images. Cool. So now we've got that. We are going to be getting a little complaint in here. Not an error, but a warning. Aha. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So this is a prop that's not going to show up in your thing. It is a key. the reason how do you do it? So a key has to be a unique thing. And right now, what's unique? I feel like the unique thing is going to be the name. We'll make the key the name. Usually going to use like an ID. So if we had IDs, we'd say card.id. We're just going to call it name right now. This needs to be unique. And so what basically, why do we need this? So when it renders these out, it is going to put these keys in here, but we're not going to see it in the HTML or in the element. What it does is internally, React uses that to cache each one of these, and this is why, when we change our data, it re-renders this entire thing, and this is one of the reasons why this is pretty fast to do. When it renders stuff in a list like this, it takes the ID and uses that, or takes the key and uses that as an internal key to keep basically a copy of that component in memory, so that when you need to render it all out again, if it's something that hasn't changed, it can just look at the key and say, oh, I'm just going to put the one I rendered before up there. So it lets that do that really fast. And that's why they need to be unique. If they're not there, it still works. It's just not as efficient internally, and you're going to get a holler. One thing that I've seen in almost every cohort, I think, someone will use the index of something. So when you map, you can actually get the index like this. It's a card index. So why wouldn't I just use index there? Great question, me. So this will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the problem is, say we have these cards, they're index 0, 1, 2, 3. And it's going to take that key and it's going to cache them. If we insert a new card, say put a new card between the Fool and Magician here, that will be index 1, 2, or 0, 1, 2, 3 again, but indices 1, 2, and 3 are cached. Even though the data is different in our array there, it's going to say, oh, I have the thing for that key. I already did that. See, here it is. And this won't change. Definitely things like people get stuff from a remote API, use the indices for keys, and then when they reload it, like nothing changes. So always put a key, always make it an ID, never make it an index. It may look like it works initially. It's going to lead to heartbreak very, very quickly. Cool. So that's the basics of creating components that use props to do stuff. And again, we can stack these as deep as we want. We can have components inside components and pass props all the way down. And you'll definitely see this in labs and exercises coming up. If you wind up nesting components 2, 3, 4 deep and wind up just taking some data from the highest level one and just sort of threading it down, passing it down prop by prop by prop by prop, that's a big pain in the butt. And there is a way to address that, but for now, that's just going to be how it works. So we've made components. We have given the components properties that we're using in the JSX. We are passing those properties down, and we are learning how to map over arrays to create lists of things with keys that show up like this. Any question there so far?
Is the key the unique key thing, like, is that something specific to like when we are doing some array iteration
Mhm.
here, or like do I need that if I'm just saying like, hey, under the header put this one card.
Yeah, if you're just doing one, it really only cares when you're making a list of stuff.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So whether that's an actual like unordered list or a bunch of cards like this, basically, if you're doing a map, you should have a key.
Okay, sweet.
The other cool thing I didn't really mention is that these array methods chain. So we can do this and get our list of stuff here. If we only want the the odd numbered cards, we can do a filter. Well, we probably do it before, right? We can say cards tarot filter. And we don't have numbers. We're gonna say for each card that where it's ugly. Every card that begins with so we'll say card. It begins with or starts with in JavaScript. I forget. MDN, save me. Starts with. There it is. Yeah, I know there's problems. So card starts with the. So I only want cards that start with the. So this is taking our list, we're filtering the list down, and then we're mapping over it. And that should give us runtime errors. What's the errors? Card starts with is not a function. Is that true? Yep, it is true because it's card name. Aha. Errors are useful. Cool. So now we only have these ones, the Fool, the Magician, and the Lovers, because all the other cards, if we look at our data, which is here, don't start with the word the. Some of them should. The Chariot, the Hermit. Now we'll see those show up. Cool. And so we can, we can do filter, we can do map, we can, sort after that, however we want. So you can stack these or chain these array methods any way you want to get the desired results. Definitely going to use that. Whoops. Definitely going to use that on the code challenge. And definitely going to use that anytime you're doing like something that has a like a drop down to sort something by, or a quote unquote search or filter image. I only want to show things that have the string that's in the filter. So definitely going to use those in the future, and we'll definitely review it a whole bunch. Awesome. A little bit of time left, and I think I'd like to jump into state just a little bit. So
I have a question on that real quick.
yeah, please.
So just for like readability, I did the chaining thing to solve the state lab or whatever it was, but I put them in separate functions.
Yeah, you can definitely.
And okay.
Yeah, because
I mean it takes up more lines, but it was easier for me to read. Is that cool?
That's so you could do, function turn into card. Right. Card, bam, and then return something like that. And I can say map turn into card. And if I'm not lying, that should do the same thing. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, since they are functions, you can definitely just make those functions, and if that's easier for you to read, fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah, that lets you do that. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. I'm still mad about my squiggly here, but we'll move on. Cool. Let's talk about state. So kind of in the phase 1 projects, when we would like load up data and I would put the data in a global variable, and then when I wanted to change stuff, I would change that list and then re-render that list out. State is basically that. State is data that is local to the component. State is cool because when state changes, or when state is updated, it knows. It knows. It has some very complicated code under the hood to re-render any part of the component that uses that state. State, again, uphill both ways. Used to be kind of difficult. Now we have these fantastic little things called hooks. A hook is just a function in React that starts with the word use. And you can even write your own hooks, and we'll talk about that in a little bit down the road. But basically, the form of a hook is use whatever. In this case, we're going to use state. So use state is a function that returns an array with 2 items in it. And I'm going to use our destructuring here again. And I'm going to say, we're just getting it from our cards, but we'll do, call this card list right now. So I'm going to say cards, and set cards. So this array is what useState returns. It returns a getter and a setter. The first thing, these are both functions. So cards, or is that true? No, it's not true. This is the object or list or whatever you have, string, number. That's the value. The second thing here, that's the function. So the way it looks like is, yeah, something's up with my ID because it usually completes that for me. Why don't you complete that for me? Oh well. useState, and so we need to import that. Import. And we're importing by name. React. And so we are going to use state. So this is the function that we're importing. We are using that function, and useState takes an argument. It is the initial value. So, and this is important. When a function renders, so many important bits that need to come together right here. When a function renders, it goes through and renders everything as it has it. useState will set up the state and do the thing with an empty one. Right now, we're going to set it synchronously inline, but you will often be doing it with a fetch that is asynchronous. So your component's actually going to render twice. Once with whatever the default state you give it is, and once with the new state once it comes back with the whatever you get from the API. The reason that's important is that you need to make sure that the default value of your state matches the shape of whatever the data you're getting back. So if you're getting back an object, this needs to be an object. If you're getting back a string, that should be an empty string. If you're getting back an array, this should be an empty array. And that's because, if we are mapping over this list here, so we're just going to map over cards. If we're mapping over this and we're loading this from a fetch, that's asynchronous. We need to make sure that if that fetch doesn't work, or before the fetch even happens, we need to make sure that that map can map over an array. If we just say, oh, it's going to be undefined or an empty string or whatever, that map is going to say, I don't know what your thing is. So this should give us an empty one with no errors. Great. If I just say, oh, useState, it's going to be undefined until I put stuff in, we're going to get an error over here. And it's going to say, cannot read properties of undefined. And this is the #1 JavaScript error that you're going to see and read backwards 1,000 times. Can't read properties of undefined, trying to read map. It's not saying that map is undefined. It's saying it's trying to call map on something that's undefined. And in that case, cards is undefined. Undefined doesn't have a map method, so no good. If we use an empty array, however, we can map over an empty array, and that will just get us an empty array over here. So bottom line, for the default state, use whatever type of thing that your eventual state is going to be. So let's set up our initial state here. So we're just going to say, so we can't say cards equals card list tarot. I mean, tarot. We can, but it's gonna complain a lot. We can't assign to a constant variable because even though this is the state and the state may get updated, it's still a constant, so we can't assign to it. And we wouldn't want to. If we did let, we could assign to it, but we're getting it initially. When it changes, if it's not in state, it's not going to know to update it. So we need to be in state. So we just need to use the set cards. Set cards. And now it is properly in state. So now we can say cards map turn into card. That's going to give us all our errors. Marker turn into card. What kind of infinite loop do we have here? Oh, yeah, this is the thing. Yeah, fantastic point, me. So like I said, we're starting off with our initial state, which is empty. So it's going to render it with the empty. We're setting cards here, though. So state is going to get updated. And dirty secret is that this looks synchronous. It is not. This is an asynchronous function. So set cards doesn't say change the value of cards to this. Set card says enqueue an action that will replace the value of cards with what I give you. So that what that means is that it's going to do everything first, then the cards are going to get set. When the state changes, it re-renders, which means it's going to try and do that again and again and so on. So what we actually want to do here is just set that as the default state. Now magic. There we go. So now we got all our buddies there. Why do this instead of just putting it in a variable? Like we said, we can update it. So if we do something where we have a fetch once, if we have a fetch here that's doing then cards, the data we get back. If we start off with an empty list, we're going to render what our default state is. It's going to do our fetch, and then once we set the new state, then it's going to say, aha, I have new state, and it renders the proper stuff. And we'll talk about that probably tomorrow. But for now, we're just setting that like that. The other big advantage here is that we can and should install, make sure there's no more errors, great. We can and should install React Developer Tools. This is an extension. Extensions, hey, yeah, extensions, why not? What do I have here? React Developer Tools. Install this extension, you're gonna need it, you're gonna love it. What it does is give you this cool little display here. So it gives you the entire structure of all of your components, and you can click into them and see, oh, hey, I have a state that has all this stuff in. Oh, hey, I have props that are called these. So if you're using state and props, you can inspect it with this, and it makes your life so much easier. The one thing to keep in mind with state that uses a list or an object, arrays and objects are reference types. What does that mean? That means that, make myself a little canvas here. That means if we have a object equals whatever, the value equals the value of this object, or constant array equals whatever. The value of this is not what's in the list. The value is where the list lives. So when you make a list or an object, somewhere in memory, it's going to find an address, OX, blah, blah, blah. It's going to find a memory address, and that's the value that's going to set to the object or array variable or constant. And then somewhere in memory, this value is going to point to the actual thing, however it's managed. Unlike if we say, const string equals blah, 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 it is just that. We call those literals, or constant num equals 23. These are actual literals. These are the actual values. These are, you can't use those. These are the addresses. So what that means is, although these are, those are pointing to, not arrow functions. Although these are constant and will not change, the contents can change. And so when we set a new value for a state, we can't just pass the old array in, because we're not passing the old array in, we're passing the address of the old array that has changed. We always need to replace the array or object with a new array or object. For lots of reasons that involve what's going on under the hood. You can sometimes get away with it, and then a lot of times that sometimes will turn into you trying to debug something for 2 days and not until you remember that, oh no, I did that thing. The easy way to remember this kind of is, this is the memory address. I kind of liken it to a house address. So I can say, my house equals, whatever my address is, my address. And so this isn't, 2400 in Rockingham Circle. 7874. So that's the address of my house. And I can say, const home equals Mark's house. And so these are both pointing at the same address. If I change something in home, I change something in Mark's house and vice versa. And although the address is a constant, I can get different furniture, I can sell stuff. The contents of the house could change, but the address of the house is always going to be the same. Same here. I can, if I have object 2, if I change something in object 2, it's going to change in object 1 and vice versa, because those aren't the actual objects. Those are just pointing to where the objects are. Again, not super intuitive, and it takes a while to get used to, but you will definitely get used to it pretty quickly, because if you don't, you'll find a lot of errors that will force you to get used to it really quickly. So yeah, I think that's all I want to talk about there. That should give you basics, the overview there. I think I have the same thing. Yeah, and we'll talk about like what it looks like when we change things, because we'll use events or fetches or whatever to change that data. And we'll probably talk about that tomorrow. For now, this is the basics of components and state and props. There are plenty of labs and exercises to run through. Do you have any questions about anything that I have gone through today? Except for what this error is, and I can't get rid of.
Can you just again talk through like each piece of line 9, like definitionally, like what everything is?
Yeah. So let's kind of go backwards. So we have our cards list that we're bringing in from our data. Our data is an object that has one key, tarot, that has an array of objects in it. And so we're saying our object.tarot, that's going to be our list. So we're calling use state that we're importing from React. Use state is a function that React gives us to manage the state of a component. The state of a component, and there can be many states. We can have as many of these as we want. Oops, not those. That's as many of these as we want. A piece of state is just a value that is contained within the component, and more importantly, when that state changes, the component will re-render. Yeah. So use state is what we use to create the value and functions that we use to manage that state. If we don't use those to manage the state, it won't behave properly, it won't re-render, and a few other things. So what we're saying here is const, and here we're using that destructuring syntax again. So useState returns an array with 2 items. The first one is the value that we can use, and the second one is a setter. So we can say, set cards, another array, and it will enqueue a change to request this value to be replaced. And it does replace the value. It doesn't just change it. And the reason that is, it actually keeps a history of all the values. And so there are React tools that let you kind of step through the history of a application for debugging purposes. You can fast forward and rewind through it. But essentially, this is the same as saying, say constant, call a state right now. And then we can say, cards, state 0, and const cards, state 1. These two do exactly the same thing. This is just the destructuring syntax that says, if you give me an array, set the items in the array to these variables instead. I think that's everything. Anything in there that you want to go over more?
No, that helps.
Awesome.
And also seeing both versions, because I think there was times where I was trying to like combine using line 9 and 11 through 14.
Yeah.
Because I saw them each in the coursework, but wasn't realizing they were the same thing.
Yeah. And this is like, you'll never ever see that used in an actual React program.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just like to kind of start getting your head around it. You can definitely use this without understanding why it works, but understanding how destructuring works is going to be super, super useful for you in the coming weeks.
Cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, great question. What other questions do we have? All right. Yeah, that's a lot for today. Cool. Let me stop sharing here. Awesome. I think that's everything I wanted to go through. Anything overall that you want to talk about component state props? Anything up through there? Or anything in the labs or exercises that you don't make sense? Cool. Good time. Awesome. I will be posting this video in the usual places and playlist on the channel. Otherwise, yeah, thanks for hanging out. I'll see y'all in a little bit.